This game is the peak of what I would call a hidden gem, but that's not because it's the best game in the world. No, it's because it's a fantastic game for a specific group of gamers like myself. It's weird, it's scuffed, and it's unique, but it's also very similar and familiar. It's your classic boomer shooter, as the kids these days would call it, though personally I would just say retro-styled FPS or even doomer shooter, but that's besides the point. It's your classic retro shooter where you go through level by level, shooting monsters until you reach the end. The graphics aren't anything crazy or necessarily unique, since there's nothing groundbreaking, and you've probably seen similar graphics before. Also, the roguelike mechanics aren't brand new under the sun. In fact, most indie games use those mechanics. But each piece or mechanic that's similar to something else, when combined, creates something unique, yet familiar enough to seem nostalgic. This combination of the familiar with the unfamiliar creates such a strange juxtaposition in my brain that just scratches an itch I didn't even know I had. Also, there's multiplayer, and when is that ever a negative? So I'm going to give you a light review of this game and explain to you why this game is such a gem in my eyes. So let's dive right in to Monster Bullets. I figured it would be best to start off with what Monster Bullets is. Monster Bullets is a retro shooter with Windows Paint graphics and a unique bullet managing mechanic that slots right into a roguelike experience. Every level of the game is procedurally generated and has a few different sections that you'll go through. The main game mode is called King Hunt, and you'll play through levels until you reach the final level with the King Goblin in it, where you'll put all of your ammo management skills to the test and try to kill the King Goblin and leave the monster-infested area. Once you defeat the boss, the run ends and you're presented with the time it took you to complete the run before going back to the main menu. The second game mode is Endless, where, well, you play endlessly through levels until you die. In between each level, you are brought to a shop section where a random set of items is available to buy, along with bandages to heal yourself, and more importantly, ammo for your weapon of choice. Once you finish shopping, you go into the next level. Pretty standard roguelike mechanics. The key feature of this game that separates it from others in the genre is the bullet management mechanic, where each monster requires a different bullet to kill it. And I'll cover this again a bit later in this video, but that's the basic idea of Monster Bullets. It's fun, and I do recommend it if you enjoy the style of game. But now I want to get into what about it drew me in and made it such a hidden gem for myself. Starting off, what drew me in the fastest was the art and presentation. First off, the idea of a solo indie game dev making a game with what looked like hand-drawn art was inspiring, but it also touched on a very special place in my gamer heart. The hand-drawn art style that looks like some guy drew it without any art experience inside of Windows Paint because they just needed assets for their game is very charming, and the sound design was pretty basic and even a little crunchy. But this all transported me back to one of my favorite eras of gaming that some of you would know as the Flash era of games. Just to be clear, it sounds like I'm dogging on the quality of art and sound design, and that's just not the case. In fact, it's quite the opposite, and I treat it all as intentional by the developer. I, in fact, love every aspect of it because it reminds me of that Flash era, which again is one of my favorite eras of gaming. It just has its own charm to it that, to me, is very special. It's a piece of that nostalgia that I mentioned earlier. However, this is the first example of how this game isn't a gem because it's the best game ever. It's a gem because the graphics, audio, and general presentation of the game reminds me of some of my favorite memories of gaming, and I love that. The next thing that made it stand out to me was that bullet mechanic. I love the idea of having to manage your ammo type and memorize and identify all the enemy variants quickly so you can effectively eliminate the enemies. Throw that into the classic FPS framework and you got yourself a retro shooter that keeps the same chaotic feel of having to quickly swap between the right weapon for the job, but also sets itself apart from others in the genre by having the chaos be transferred into the ammunition instead of the weapon. This allows for players to find a weapon that they more optimally play with, which is neat. It keeps that similar gameplay loop people familiar with the genre are used to, but changes it enough to be unique and allows for a new gameplay experience. And once again, it stands out as a gem of a game for myself as it puts a unique spin on one of my favorite genres of games. Finally, the atmosphere. The atmosphere is right up my alley. I love surreal, mind-bending themes, and Monster Bullets definitely delivers on that front. And on top of this, the game has an almost analog horror feel to it, which, by the way, is one of my favorite horror genres, so I just can't help but to eat it up. It just has this feeling of there's more than what's on the surface, and I love it. The idea of this implied lore with each enemy variant of how they affect you, how and why each ammunition type affects them, why one ammunition type is a weakness for them, how they got there, why you're fighting them, why is there a wizard in the shop, etc. It just seems like there's so much more about this game that's not being said, but it's just being barely kept out of reach. And for me, that makes me want to jump out and grab the missing pieces, even if it costs the fall of my own psyche. And this all makes this another reason why, to me personally, it's a hidden gem of a game. To sum it all up, Monster Bullets is a roguelike retro shooter that adds a unique twist onto the genre with its bullet management and art style. Is it for everyone? No, not at all. But for those who this game was made for, it's right up your alley. It's fun, replayable, it's just a definition of enjoyable. It brings me back to a time where solo game developers would make a simple but fun game with the limited resources they had and release it to the public for everyone's enjoyment. A time where games were games. Where games were experiments. Where games were fun. This game won't be a gem to everyone, and that's okay. But what I hope you take away from this, besides a better understanding and a small review of the game Monster Bullets, is that a game doesn't have to be popular or perfect for you to enjoy it. A gem game to you may be an unplayed, unpolished, broken mess that no one plays but you. And that's okay, because it just has that something that makes it special to you. And that's all that matters. And that's what truly makes a game worthy of being called a gem.